right, welcome. And we are live, Chris.
Very good.
And so I'm just really smiling because this is something that I've been wanting to do for a while. So, but since it's 4 o'clock on the dot, happy 4 o'clock. What I figure is that we'll go ahead and do like an icebreaker, a 5-minute fun icebreaker, just to give people some time to get into the room before we start jumping into the conversation. And then we'll jump into the formalities of who I am and who Chris is and what we're here to do today. So for our fun little icebreaker, as you're coming into the room, what we'd love for you to do is to answer this question for us. On a scale from 1 to 10, 10 being might as well call me an advocacy expert, to 1 being don't even look my way when it comes to advocacy, how would you rate yourself and what would you title it? Right? Like, so how would you describe that level? So for me, just to kind of give you some ideas to get some ideas percolating. For me, I choose number 5. I choose that I'm at a level number 5. And what I would say about that level is, I know some things. I know some things that, all I need is just a little bit more. And I feel like I might even be a bit dangerous, right? So that's where I'm at. So Chris, where are you at? You already know where I would put you at, but where would you say you're at?
I would feel comfortable saying like a 7, simply because I really feel I could study this to death for the next 10 years and still have stuff to learn. But I would say that if you can get yourself up to, say, a 3, you could be effective.
Okay. And I mean, I think it really changed my perspective, Chris. Like, if you're a 7, then can I keep the 5?
Sure. Of course. Right. It's not on a total gradient, right? I'll give you an example. In Boy Scouts, to get to Eagle Scout, you have to earn a lot of different ranks. The last rank before Eagle Scout is called Life, and it's actually the halfway point to the Eagle. So that last mile is really hard.
Michelle Leaks. Okay, definitely going to share. So definitely want to give a shout out to Michelle Leaks. So she said, I'm a 4, know enough for my role and learning more. Awesome. Good. Love that. And then I also want to give a shout out to Michelle Leaks because she has also joined the Government Affairs Committee with the Indy Sherm local chapter. So super cool. So it is awesome to see you here, Michelle. Awesome. So number 4. So what would you say about that, Chris? Like, know enough for my role and learning more. And then you said that number, like at least at 3, it's effective.
If you can get to 3, you can be effective. Because quite frankly, when you think about this and what we're doing here, talking about advocacy, I would say by the time we're done with 4 episodes, people on that and listening and learning are probably going to be at the point where they can do that.
Definitely. And that's exactly why we're starting this. We've started this. And I won't get in too much into it since I'm going to cover it later. So we have about like 1 minute left. So let's see. And I'm definitely, like I said, I would definitely love if you're in the room. Welcome. Just join in on a scale from 1 to 10, 10 being my people might as well call me an advocacy expert, to 1 being don't even look my way. How would you rate yourself on that scale? How would you title it? Yes. So, okay, good. We got Tiffany Ewing. Let's add you to the screen. Maybe a 5, 6. Ooh, I like Michelle's answer. I know what I need, but always learning. Right? I mean, because with advocacy,
Tiffany knows a lot.
But what's really funny is because when I first got into the role of Director of Government Affairs, and it's only been a year so far, I kind of was a little bit hard on myself because I was just like, oh my gosh, I don't really know any of this stuff. But as I start to listen to other conversations, people talking about advocacy, I'm realizing that I do know a little bit more, but there's always room to grow. Thank you so much for sharing, Tiffany. Kathy Ramsey, I'm a level 2. Know some, but not involved in any way. You know what?
Good.
I love that. And I love the honesty in that because you know what? That's okay because we all come in from different, very from different perspectives. And sometimes when you learn, when you're as you're learning, depending on where you're learning, at which point you're learning, sometimes it just makes it pop a little bit more. I don't know because I feel like because I'm older now, I understand history a little bit better than when I was younger. But that's me. Okay, so 406. Okay, thank you. Oh, okay, we have one more. So I'm gonna definitely do that and then we'll move on. Alice Hammond, thank you for sharing. I'm a level 2 also. I listen a lot and need to be more outspoken. Then you are in the right place, Alice, because that's exactly what we want to do. We want to get to the place where we're helping HR professionals find their advocacy voice, right? Because we're all not going to have the same voice. We're all not going to speak and say it to the same degree, but we all have a voice and that voice matters. Okay, so I'm going to move along so that we can really start hearing Chris speak. So thank you so much for engaging in this icebreaker. I think it's always fun to just kind of do something a little little bit lighthearted before we start getting into the complexity of of advocacy. Okay. Okay. So this is the disclaimer for the show. Now, I'm not going to read it like I did in the first episode, but what I will say is that I just want to be mindful and intentional to say that this is not a program that is, directly endorsed by Indy SHRM or SHRM at any level. Both Chris and I are both volunteers and we both have a passion for advocacy, and he has a lot of knowledge in HR advocacy. And I thought, if I'm going to get involved in HR advocacy, I want to at least build some kind of community. And so this is all about building awareness and creating opportunity for other like-minded HR professionals to jump in and join in on the conversation. Anything you want to add to that, Chris? If there's something I
think that covers it. Yeah.
Super cool. So let's see. Okay. So because I'm a coach, I always just want to be mindful that, right now, as we're speaking about advocacy, it's not intense, and that's fine. But I always just want to be mindful that, that I should at least share my story, and then I'll get into the keep in mind rules. But my why is that I love advocacy. I love to talk. I love advocacy. And I figure the more and more that I learn and I listen to other people who with different perspectives, I start to grow. And I just want to share with everyone. Like I just want to create community so that it's not just my voice, but I'm creating a community where I'm hearing other people's voices. So I like to think of the parable of the blindfolded elephant, right? Like, we're all going to see things from different perspectives. We're going to describe the elephant from different perspectives or from our different vantage points, but we all are talking about the same elephant, right? So I love to hear different perspectives because it helps me understand the whole. So that's my reason for doing it. Chris, why is your reason for saying yes to me?
Sure. Simply because I think that an electorate that is informed and knows how to engage with elected officials makes for both a better electorate and a better government.
Yes.
And they need that feedback loop, especially from HR professionals. I'll talk about more in a couple later shows. We're going to talk about some specific pieces of legislation and how they got through the way they did and things like that. And how some of the contributions I was able to make shape those in a positive way for the HR professionals, to give an example to that. But the whole ecosystem of government stays healthy when the electorate is engaged and the government is paying attention. So.
I agree. And I feel like it's less stressful because I know personally, and I can speak from my experience, is that if I don't know or I don't understand it, I'm irritated and I'm frustrated. And so the more that I understand, I'm able to be a little bit relaxed because then it's just like, oh, it's because it works that way. It's not personal. It's just the way it works. So, and Chris, I think over the period of our conversations, you'll see that Chris is just very, I would say, expert in just helping you see the science behind the activities that go on. So it's just not like, oh, they're doing this. He helps me understand. And so that's why I just want to share that with the community as well. Okay, so it's about public policy engagement. And that's what this is all about. Chris will also let you know, and I agree as well, that it's through politics that you're able to get things done. Because I tried to look at it without the lens of some sort of politics, and it does play into it. So Chris is definitely going to expand on that as he gets to that point in his conversation. HR advocacy is coalition building. So I say this is because we're all not going to think the same as HR professionals. We all have different lived experiences, and that's respected, that's honored. But can we find those commonalities that we can all agree on, right? Because there's power in numbers. And so if we can get behind something that we all agree on or believe in, then we can support a policy and help, the politics behind it to get it passed. Ask questions. I'm going to do my best to ask the best questions that I possibly can as I'm listening to Chris as we're having our conversation. But if I'm not asking the right questions, or you feel like, there's something that, we're missing and we're glossing over, definitely put it in the comments. I'll stop and we'll definitely put it up for Chris to expound upon a bit more. All right. And then always embody a spirit of curiosity and open-mindedness. I know that sometimes we think we know, but at some point you don't know, right? So if we just stay malleable and open-minded, we'll probably learn something that can really help us in our HR advocacy journey. Okay, let me see, because then I need to hurry up. Oh, okay. So then I just wanted to say this real quick, is that I do have an event coming up. You're going to see more on it on my LinkedIn page. So if you follow me on LinkedIn, definitely learn more about it. Chris, what do you have coming up?
I'm going to be speaking at the South Central Indiana Human Resources chapter here in Bloomington, as a matter of fact, for the November chapter meeting on the second Wednesday of the month. And then the following week, I'm headed out to DC to work the Hill for my last visit. It's the fourth quarter visit to the Hill. So I'll be hitting the Indiana delegation when I'm there, in conjunction with SHRM Volunteer Leader Business Meeting.
Oh my gosh. You know what? I mean, I know we didn't get to talk about but if there's some sort of way that we can kind of get on-site scoop.
Maybe I can do a recording or something. We'll talk about that.
Okay. Definitely. To see,
I might be able to do something on site. Okay, sure.
I mean, maybe even be able to pull some people off to the side and say, hey, let's just join this, real quick,
right.
No pressure.
We'll talk about that offline.
Okay. That's how you do it. Add the pressure to it, right? When you're trying to negotiate. Okay. So now we're about to get started. So I have those slides in the beginning just to make sure that, I'm touching on the points that are really, that I really want to be intentional and transparent about. So without further ado, we're about to jump into the conversation with Chris. We're going to talk about demystifying the science behind the legislative process and the role that politics plays in it. And, and just really understanding just all of the stuff that goes with that. And then we're going to talk about some breaking news. And then actually, we're going to touch on the breaking news before we get into that. So, do you want to? Let's do that. You want to touch on the breaking news before we kind of get into the meat?
Okay. Will. Yeah.
And then let me take this off.
The House of Representatives today elected a speaker who went through first ballot, and the new speaker of the House is a Republican from Louisiana named Mike Johnson. He is a member of the Republican Study Committee group. So when you look at the Republican alignment in Congress, there are a group of 20-odd conservative Republicans who belong to the Freedom Caucus. Mm-hmm. And then there's about 68, 70 in this Republican Study Committee, which is also conservative. But also has a lot of establishment Republicans in it too. So it's kind of like a mix. And so he's coming out of that. Now, having said that, he got in on first ballot because I'm pretty sure most all the Freedom Caucus Republicans who were present voted for him, which means that there was a deal done. Now, I do not know, and we probably won't know for some time, what exactly he signed up for to get those votes, because votes on anything, including legislation, typically don't come for free. right? Support is typically given with the expectation that there's going to be some reciprocity involved, right? That's typical in
Mhm.
politics, and so we just don't know what the reciprocity is yet, but we'll find out. And
Oh,
when I
yes.
do, I'll write about it in the monthly newsletter that the Sherman State Council puts out, that goes out to all the members. So I'll talk
Okay.
about that. But what I wanted to talk about today, we talked in our first episode about the structure of government, right?
Yes.
That we have a legislative side of it with two houses, a Senate and a House, and then we've got an executive office whose job it is to execute the laws that are passed by the
Mhm.
legislature, and then the Supreme Court, acts as the referee, right? Kind of think about it in that fashion. And every state is similarly organized. As a matter of fact, the only state that doesn't have a House and a Senate is Nebraska, which has a unicameral
Yes.
House, unicameral body. So, but that said, they still have everything, their own executive, which is a governor, and their own state Supreme Court, right? So that is how it works. So when it comes to getting a piece of legislation done, uh, it is very hard because there are numerous constraints in the process, right? So,
Okay.
in order for something to happen, first of all, a bill has to be put together. A bill has to be organized and written in a very specific way. And in the Indiana General Assembly, there are legislative and legal services that the legislature has available to it to help them properly draft and write that bill with the right words and right terminology and all of that.
So then who comes up with the idea
Yeah,
for the
so
bill?
the ideas come from all over the place, right? So in the Indiana legislature, and I am not kidding, the idea could come from your next door neighbor. That
Oh,
does happen.
okay.
That
Okay.
does happen. As a matter of fact, I was helping a representative. This is about 10 years ago now, but he was working on a bill, and I had some issues with it in terms of how he had drafted it, and so he called me, and we started talking over, and I was laying out the concerns that I had from an HR perspective, and I finally said, what are you trying to accomplish here? What's the issue? It was around professional licenses, right?
Okay.
And
Okay. Yes.
it
Yes.
was
Yes.
because his next door neighbor had a daughter who needed a professional license for, I don't know, nails or something like that, whatever it was, and was having a lot of difficulty going through that process and getting it done. And it had a lot to do with a law that had been passed in the prior legislature, and how
Okay.
the bureaucracy of the state had interpreted that law had created a whole lot of problems for people trying to renew their occupational licenses. And so when I finally figured out what he was talking about and digging into it, and I talked to the Indiana Chamber about it, then we were able to get the thing fixed up and knitted the right way. And so it went through and gave that proper instruction, if you will, to the legislature. So it can literally come from a next door neighbor.
From and
In
but
reality, I'm sorry.
but I love that, Chris. And I just want to just really, I love the fact that you don't have to be like, the distinguished lawyer to be able to, get
No,
an idea, to go through the process and actually become passed
no.
law.
You,
So
you,
I
you do
love how
have to
you
be
do.
a constituent of the person
Well, of
that you're
course, right?
talking
Because that's
to.
that's
Yeah,
the only
yeah,
reason that they would care to listen is if we're
yeah.
their constituent, right?
Yeah,
Like,
no, I mean, I've heard legislators so before. Somebody ran into him in Kroger, and they started talking, and they said, "Well, let's set up a meeting. We'll talk about it." So that, again, these people are in the community, right? When it comes to the state,
okay,
so it can come from there.
okay,
In reality, a lot of the legislation, especially the hot button type of legislation that people hear about right in a session, the kind the news talks about, typically come from think tanks,
mm-hmm,
both on the left and the right and the center, public
mm-hmm,
advocacy groups, you name it. There are lots of policy shops that create model legislation that can be used.
hold on.
And that's happened here in Indiana. We've used model legislation that's come from Tennessee, and other states have used model legislation that has come out of Indiana, right?
So when you say model legislation, is that like a template? Like,
Yes, yeah,
oh,
that's the best way to think about it.
huh,
It's a little bit more now, but you're correct. I mean, that's the right way to think about it. as a template.
Interesting.
And so these are generated typically, like I said, by public policy groups. And there are, some big ones that work at the state level, all across the nation. And there are a lot, as you can imagine, in Washington, D.C. Right. As a matter of fact, SHRM oftentimes does research and
Yes, yes,
puts
yes.
together positions on bills, and oftentimes looks for legislators to get legislators who will write a bill that will take care of what SHRM is trying to address. Right. So how SHRM works on that is really no different than anybody else in that regard that is trying to get legislation passed. You have to do a lot of education with legislators and things like that to get it done. So I would say that happens a fair amount of the time. Then there are also pieces of legislation that come from the state, especially if it's something involving like business or insurance or something where something has come up. And it's become very clear that if the legislature doesn't deal with this, it's going to cause a lot of trouble. And so they'll just jump on that. And oftentimes that type of legislation, nobody hears about it because nobody fights about it. It's an obvious issue that has to be addressed. And so they hop on it and get it done. And the news never talks about it, right? Because it's not a fight.
It's not going to bring drama. So it's like, oh.
No. And let's face it, news organizations and everybody else has to have a hook to write and get people involved and stuff like that. So, but the fact of the matter is the fate of most legislation that enters that type of process is that it dies. The majority of legislation dies.
Oh, that it dies. Okay.
It never gets passed, the vast majority of it. And the reason being for that is it's a tortuous process, right? So first the legislation has to get drafted, right? Okay. It has to be put in the form of a bill. Okay. And that's got to be authored by somebody who has the standing to do it, meaning they are an elected legislator, right? There's a further constraint that in most legislatures, and Indiana is a good example, there's a practical limit to how many bills any legislator can offer.
Oh, right? Okay. So how many?
Yeah. Well, the reason being, think about it, so that's a constraint, right? So that's a constraint. How many bills can I write, right? In a session. Okay. In a session. So then the next constraint is once it's written, then it goes into the hopper, and then it receives what's called a committee assignment. Okay. Okay.
Hopper, real quick. The hopper is that like what the box?
Oh, the hopper. I'm sorry. That's a terminology. In the old days, you would put the bills in a box.
Okay, so it is like, okay.
Yeah, literally, okay. And they still do that.
Do that.
It's called when you refer to a bill being dropped.
So it's not electronic. It's not digital.
Yeah, it's electronic now, but I mean.
Okay.
Yeah, it's called.
I was going to say,
but that's called being dropped, and it goes into the hopper, right? And
okay.
So think about, I guess, an old seed hopper or something, but you got a lot of volume in there, and so then. Committee assignments have to be made. So the bill is looked at and a decision is made as to where that bill should be routed. And there are committees in both the House and the Senate at the state level, House and the Senate at the Senate level, as well as sometimes subcommittees, right? Even below that. So subcommittees are common in Washington, D.C. because of the sheer freaking volume of legislation. Okay. Do we have here in Indiana? Do we have subcommittees? We don't have subcommittees.
No. Okay. No. I guess we're like the subcommittees.
We have committees, yeah. And as a matter of fact, if you went to the Indiana General Assembly website, there's literally a pull-down menu where you can see standing committees in the House and in the Senate.
Yes.
And you can look at those. And those committees have representatives on it of both parties, with the majority party, the one that controls the House and the one that controls the Senate, being the ones who have the greater number of representatives on that committee, right?
Okay.
So it has to have, it basically reflects what's called balance of power, right? So in Indiana, there are more Republicans on Senate committees and more Republicans on House committees than Democrats, right?
Okay. Yes, because
Okay.
it
Yeah.
has to represent. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
And each of these committees considers bills in a specific field or branch of expertise, right? And so, generally speaking, the folks on health provider or health policy, anything that's got health in it, right? They are the bills involving that are going to be routed to that committee, and typically those legislators have some practical experience in that. I told you before that on insurance matters,
Hmm.
it's very, very common for the members of both parties on that committee to have insurance backgrounds, right?
It's common.
Oh, yes. Yeah, because they actually understand it.
Oh, okay. Because they're going to gravitate
They have
to their skill
expertise in it.
sets.
Yeah,
Yeah,
so
their
they'll get that
expertise.
committee assignment, right? They
No,
get that committee assignment.
but how does it get decided, right? Because
The
you
Speaker of the House and the Senate Majority Leader are the ones that pick who's going to be on committees for who's going to sit on those committees, right? And then the minority leaders put their people forward too, but as a matter of courtesy, their people are invariably allowed on those committees. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
we do have a question.
Sure.
Lillian Clark, thank you so much for your question. Are they collecting these ideas year round?
Yes, it never stops.
So
It
then
never
how do they collect it? Like,
So
how?
there are different ways to do it, right? Again, people do research. Again, there are lots of public policy groups that put forward their ideas and work to find sympathetic legislators who will carry their bills and draft legislation for them.
Okay.
I
Or
have,
lobbying? Is
pardon me?
that sort of lobbying? Is that how?
That's not necessarily lobbying because
No, no, not
what
even
I do
lobbying.
isn't
Oh,
lobbying. What I do is provide information to do education. I
okay.
don't lobby
Okay.
at
So, but
all.
lobbying would be part of that,
Well, there
could be
are
part of
lobbyists
that.
that do
Okay.
that. No, yes, of course, there are registered lobbyists that do that and things like that. But no, none of us would be. None of us on this podcast. Anybody we're talking to, you're not going to be a lobbyist. You're not expected to be.
Yeah.
SHRM doesn't have a PAC. The HR Indiana SHRM does not have a PAC. We don't do endorsements. We don't give money. I mean, that's none of that.
And then talk about a PAC real quick. I mean, I guess because I just learned about what a PAC meant this year, so I don't know if there's a lot of green people, but can you just real quick,
Yeah,
what is a PAC?
PAC is PAC, Political Action Committee,
Mm-hmm.
and they are typically created to raise money. And
Okay.
so people get money, people get mailers all the time. If you've ever donated money to either party, oh my gosh, you'll just get carpet bombed with
You get all the
requests
email.
to donate. They sell their lists and stuff like that. Yeah,
Yes.
we do not get engaged in that. We stay about as far from that as you can possibly get.
Okay.
No, what we would be doing, what anybody would reasonably do, would be giving the perspective of a practicing professional, right? And that's what
Yes.
I do when I testify before the Indiana legislature. I speak in terms of what a bill is calling for, and if I support it, I say why, and if we oppose it, we say why, and what you need to do to fix it, right?
Yeah.
So that's education. To me, that's education.
Yeah, and that's
Yes,
chill.
it's advocacy. Yes, it's advocacy. You're speaking up for your profession and things like that. But in my mind, I'm just saying, 99% of the time, I'm just saying, look, you're violating federal law. You need to change the language in this, and also giving them their point of view. I mean, when I do advocacy, what I usually speak about in terms of is, whenever people pass workplace legislation, anything affecting the workplace,
Mhm.
what you have to remember is that HR is the one that's going to have to implement it.
That's right. That's right. Say it
99%
again,
of the
Chris.
time.
Say it again,
And-
Chris. Say
Say
that
what
part
again?
again, louder. Who's going to have to implement that?
HR.
Yeah, that's right.
HR is going to have to implement, and so oftentimes they need to hear our voice because they don't have clue one how it's actually going to work, right?
Yeah, because
so
in theory it sounds good,
well,
but
yeah, but you got to remember that many of these folks have never operated a business, a lot of them never been in a business, and so they have no practical experience with what we're talking about, and that's why they need to hear from us. I mean, we can't assume they know how it's going to work. As a matter of fact, your best and safest assumption is they don't have any idea how it's going to work. They know what they want.
Yes.
They know the outcome that they want.
But the how, that's up for grabs. Yeah.
That's hard. Yeah. But anyway, I'll get back to this piece, right? It gets assigned to a committee.
Yes,
right?
it gets assigned.
Yes. Now, the committees are generally assigned more bills than they can possibly handle, right? Because the major time constraint in Indiana has to do with when the General Assembly is in session. So on odd years, we do a budget. Indiana does a biennial budget. So on odd years, the legislature is in for 61 days and must by law end on April 30. Okay?
Yes.
That is a massive time constraint. Indiana has a part-time legislature. By example, California does not. California's legislature stays in session. Okay, ours does not. We have part-time. So we're only in there. They're only in there for the 6 days. You got to get out by April 30. And then in even years, so coming up, we're going to have a legislature in. They can only be there for 30 days.
For 30 days.
30 days.
And, you know, and just why I find this so key to understand and why it's helped me relax and just kind of chill sometimes when I hear things, it's just like, okay, just process it, try to understand it. That the legislators are fighting. I mean, they're working hard against a very tight deadline. And so I can definitely see how politics, you know, of course, not nasty, dirty, you know, crazy politics, but understanding the true art of politics will allow you to help facilitate that.
Well, because it has to be, right? And
yes.
So my point is that the committees get more bills than they can hear. So the greatest authority that a committee chair has is simply picking which bills will be heard and which bills won't.
So, okay. So then how do HR professionals impact that decision?
That's hard to do. that's hard to do. Now, having said that, I've been in this role a long time. I've testified in the Indiana legislature many times. The House Labor and Pension Committee and the Senate Labor Committee, those committees, the people on those committees, the chairs of those committees already know what I'm going to say more or less before I get there. Right? They know, because we have policy pegs, right? We have policy pegs at HR Indiana SHRM, right? So we oppose employer mandates. We oppose anything that's going to put us in the switches, right? So they pretty much know what I'm going to oppose if I step up there, right? And so as a result, I'm sure that's in their mind. I don't think any committee chair loses their sleep over me. I don't have that kind of stroke, right? But they know what's going to run into a lot of opposition. And so you have to make a decision as a committee chair. You know, how much political capital do you want to burn picking up a bill that is going to be a dogfight? See what I mean? Yes. Against all the other calendar that you have to manage, because hearings eat up time, right? Because they have committee hearings. And so hearing a bill, and that's public, right? So anybody can literally walk in to the committee hearing, sign their name on the book, and get called to give their piece and their opinion on the bill. So
then how do you know when it's time for you to do that?
It's published.
Okay. So then how do you know where to find,
that's on the Indiana General Assembly website. So once they go into session, the committees, you just go to the committees and they put out a packet on a weekly basis that shows if they're going to meet, and if so, when, and what bills are they going to be hearing. And in that packet will be all the legislation that they're going to hear.
And you said that that's in the Indiana Business Journal,
No,
IBJ?
Indiana General Assembly website.
Oh, Indiana General.
That's
Oh, okay,
public.
okay.
Yeah,
Oh, okay. So then is there
yeah,
like
the
some
Indiana
sort of
Business Journal does it too, but that's behind a paywall. So
exactly, because
you
that's
have
what I
to
was going to say.
subscribe. Yeah, no,
Yeah.
the Indiana General Assembly website is.
Oh, okay. And then is there like a notification? Because it's
Yeah,
the
so it's
website is
interesting.
better now.
They only have to give a 24-hour notice that they're going to have a hearing.
I mean, but really,
So,
yeah.
So when I'm tracking legislation, well, I don't want to get in that now. We don't have time for this.
Yeah,
on
yeah.
this.
Oh,
Let me
we'll
just
get into
stick with
that,
this.
how
Let
you
me just
go
stick
about
with
that
the
process.
constraints, right? So
Yes.
there's a time constraint. So you
Okay.
already get more bills than you can hear. And so you have to pick the bills you are going to hear. Okay?
Okay.
And then the committee has to vote on that bill. If the committee votes against the bill, it dies. If the bill isn't heard, it dies. If the bill is passed out of committee and is sent to the floor, but is not actually called for a vote on the floor by the time the midpoint of the General Assembly occurs, it dies.
Okay.
Okay. So that's what I'm saying. Most legislation dies. The majority of it dies every session.
How many bills would you say that a committee typically could receive?
Well, it
in a
depends
session
on exactly what's going on, right?
What's going on, the climate of the
yeah, some committees
okay.
can just some committees can just get buried. Labor and pension is always busy. Health is always busy. Education is always busy. They're all
education.
busy. They're all
Yeah.
busy. There's no backwater committee, right? They're all busy.
And then dies means that it's just dead for that session unless it gets picked back.
That's correct.
Okay.
And that's why oftentimes it can take years to get legislation passed. Most legislation doesn't die from opposition, really. It dies by the calendar, right? You can't get a committee hearing. Let's say that they would like to hear the bill. Let's say they'd like to hear the bill, but they just run out of time. Right, because remember, even in the long session in Indiana, the 60-day one, once the 30-day point hits, any legislation that hasn't passed its House of origin, right? Because bills can originate in the Senate and they can originate in the House.
Okay.
So once you hit the midpoint of the session, if a bill hasn't passed the Senate yet, it's dead. Similarly, if it hasn't passed the House yet, it's dead, even if it got out of committee.
So you're saying that because as the committee as the bill comes into a particular committee, so if it comes into the House, for example, because I'm trying to process it.
Let's say it starts in the House and
it starts in the House, and if it doesn't actually move out of the House and move to the Senate by that 30-day mark,
it's dead.
It's dead.
Correct. And so sometimes that happens. Sometimes votes stack up. As you can imagine, it's pretty frantic in those last few days before the midpoint of a session where both senators are trying to get it, and sometimes you just can't get it to the floor.
Sometimes so then that was going to be the question I was going to ask for clarification. Okay, so moving out of so if it's in the House of origination, if it's trying to move outside of that House, it needs to be heard by the floor. On the floor.
It needs to be passed.
It needs to be passed. After it's heard on the floor.
The other way it could die would be to not pass.
but it has to be heard on the floor. I guess what is the floor?
It has to go to the floor. So
so then that's part of that process.
Yeah. And there are multiple readings, right?
So that's deep. So it doesn't die by opposition, death by calendar. And I think that's really good to know, because sometimes if you hear like, oh, this bill has been killed so many times or it's died so many times, but if you don't understand the context behind it, you can totally get the wrong story.
And sometimes you get totally overwhelmed by larger forces, right? And this has happened to me before with legislation. We've been behind, like WorkShare, been behind that for 15 years. 15 years been trying to get that bill passed. And we thought been close a couple of years and just weren't able to pull it off. So, yeah. Yeah.
Sharon comment, death by
Yeah,
calendar
death
is
by
good to know.
calendar is good
Yeah.
to know. Yeah, yeah. So even if you,
Perspective.
yeah. So even if you have it, that's what I'm saying. It is so hard to me. I'm not surprised that legislation doesn't pass. I'm shocked how much actually does against that
That's right.
backdrop.
And I did want to bring up some of the takeaways that I did get back from, because that was some of the things you said, right? Like, and I wanted you to elaborate a little bit on that, because
Yeah.
you said because the founders didn't like concentrated powers, so the structure was broken up, so to speak, in intentionally by design,
Yeah.
that things don't get done quickly.
Right.
And then you said, yeah, 'cause you're like, I'm honestly, we're all upset because things are going too slow, but really the way that it's been designed,
They're supposed to.
they're supposed to be
Mitch,
that way.
Mitch Daniels, when he was governor, one of the things he said that I think captures the point of view of a lot of Hoosiers, not all, it's never all, but a lot of Hoosiers.
Yeah, you
But
cannot
I
have
think I think how he said this kind of reflects how the Indiana government actually functions. And he said two things. First of all, he said that the government that governs best governs least.
Say that again. Okay, let's say that again. The government
that governs best governs least.
Oh.
doesn't get too involved. And then the next thing he said was, what government does do should be excellent.
Should be excellent.
Excellent. Yeah.
That was
the point
a constant.
he was making when he reformed the Indianapolis Motor Vehicles Bureau, because the Indianapolis Motor the DMV, the BMV, used to be a train wreck and was horrible. Nobody wanted to deal with it, and it took forever, and it was just a nightmare. And we have one of the best in the nation now. So that's an idea of a point of view. So what do you do with dead bills? Yes, dead bills often survive exactly as they were drafted and get reintroduced in the very next legislature.
Oh, okay. So then, no, not like maybe at times tweaks, but most of the time, no tweaks. Just
tweaks. So now it depends on why it dies. Okay. So for instance, sometimes it just runs into too much opposition. And so in between the legislatures, when the legislatures are in session, it's not uncommon at all for the authors of bills and other folks like that to contact folks on the other side and say, hey, what was your problem with this? And is there anything we can do, any change we can make that we could live with, that you could live with, that we'd get your vote? Right. And so oftentimes when people put legislation forward, they mostly want to do it just to see, who's opposed to it and why. And so they learn from that and are like, oh, okay, here's where we're going to have trouble. And so oftentimes bills go through all kinds of iterations in order to get more votes.
Okay.
So it oftentimes takes multiple cycles for a piece of legislation to pass. Years.
Goodness. And then, so I kind of want to piggyback even off of that. And Lillian says that makes sense.
And
my
now
question
one more
was
wrinkle, and this is the politics. You got to hope that the people who would vote for your bill don't get defeated in the next election, and somebody comes in who won't do that. That's another rim shot.
Right. And it just shows you how complex advocacy can be. Right. And I think that that's why coalition building is just really, we can all help each other, use each, leverage resources to help each other. But I kind of want to piggyback that even Lillian's question with what do you do with dead bills? So maybe it's not necessarily a dead bill, but
they get reincarnated.
But I've also heard people say, it's going to be in the summer session or summer study.
Okay. So let me finish with committees and
okay.
Summer. They're called summer study sessions. So
Summer
study. So I'll get to that in a minute. So anyway, you go through the committee thing, maybe get a hearing, maybe you don't. You don't get a hearing, you're going to be dead. You get a hearing and you don't get voted out committee, you're dead. You get voted out committee, you go to the floor, you don't get heard, you're dead. You go to the floor, you get voted down, you're dead. Okay. And so then a slender series of legislation that gets passed between the two houses. Okay. So now the House has to vote on the Senate bills of origin. Now the Senate has to vote on the House bills of origin.
Okay.
And if you thought that the same party, the very same party, so I'll use the Republicans because in Indiana, the Republicans have a supermajority, which means They have enough votes to control all legislation. If you would think that the Senate Republicans would have the same void of view as the House Republicans in terms of how they wrote legislation, you'd be drastically wrong. So oftentimes the two houses that get the legislation start fiddling with it.
Because each knows better?
If they make any kind of substantive change, then what has to happen is what's called a conference committee gets put together. And so some legislators from the House and some legislators from the Senate, from both parties, get together and see if they can come to agreement on those changes or have different changes. If they can't come to agreement, the bill will die.
So is it two different personalities going back to the...
It's from two different houses. Okay, so the House of Origin. So the Senate passes a bill. It goes to the House. The House said, we want some changes to this. They can do that. It's in their house.
Mm-hmm.
The Senate could also make changes. The bills that come from the House. But material changes or changes are going to do something that the other side can't easily handle. Those are going to go to conference committee to see if they can be hashed out.
Okay. Conference committee. Okay.
And then if they can't, then the thing's going to die, because if the House, when the House sends when the bills, if the bills can't pass clean like that, then you've got a mess and those bills will die. And sometimes that happens too.
Wow.
Now, if by some miracle you get through that gauntlet, then it passes both houses and it goes to the governor for signature.
Okay.
The governor does not have to sign it. The governor
That's right, the executive power.
Veto it.
Yes.
In which case, or if he vetoes the bill, then it goes back to the Senate, and the Senate and then the Senate votes on whether or not they will override that veto. Right.
Okay.
Yeah. And as a practical matter, occasionally governors are overridden, vetoes are overridden, and that has happened, right? But most of the time they aren't.
Okay. And because I don't know, and like I said, this is a great refresher on history for me. Yeah. So when it goes to the governor's desk and the governor vetoes it, and then it goes back to the senator.
The governor usually signs it. Let me be clear.
And just worst case, or just, a negative story.
I'm going along the line of the ways you can die, because even if you pass the House and the Senate, you're still not out of the woods.
So then how does the Senate, how does the Senate at that point, what does the Senate need to do to overturn the veto?
They have to have a 2/3 majority.
And that's when the 2/3 majority.
Yeah, that's when the 2/3
okay.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay.
Now, if the governor signs it, then it goes into law.
Okay.
Okay. And
typically, how quickly? How soon?
I'm sorry, what?
How soon does it actually?
Yeah. The bill always states that. In Indiana, as a matter of convention, they go into effect on July 1st.
Oh, as a matter of convention, July 1st.
Occasionally, bills are passed that go into effect immediately. It's rare, but it happens.
Oh, okay. So then that's a rarity.
Yeah, so during COVID, there were a couple of bills that went into force.
That's right. Those executive orders. Yeah.
No, executive orders.
Not even executive order.
Yeah, I'm not going to talk about executive orders.
You see how deep this hole can go.
That's a whole different thing.
That's a whole other thing. Lord have.
Yeah.
Help me.
The governor's only choices. The governor's only choices once a bill passes both this House and the Senate is to sign it or not.
Okay.
That's a governor's only choice: sign it or not. And then once it's signed, then it goes into law. And like I said, the bill always states, if passed, when it would take effect. That's always always there.
And then it's always easy to find the bill, the HB, what is it, Congress.gov or the Indiana General
Assembly. Indiana General Assembly, yeah. Once the session, it's not once the session starts, because the bills will start filtering in, but they generally have 2 weeks-ish to get the bills in. I usually wait for about 2 weeks after the session begins to go start looking at the legislation that's in the hopper, because I don't want to piecemeal it. I mean, I'm a volunteer. There's only so much time I can give this, right? So I usually wait until, they're in there. The deadline is passed to put one in, and that's usually when I go in and look. And anybody can do that. Anybody, you just go to Indiana General Assembly website and you click on bills. I mean, you go to the House, you go to the Senate, you click on bills, and it will show you all of them.
Yes, and yes. And maybe, we can have that where we can kind of go through that and you can kind of talk through it. That's for like later stuff.
That's later. That's a whole nother
like a whole other thing.
But anyway, so that's how that works.
Okay.
At the state level. Okay. It works nearly identical in the federal government, except for the fact that the federal government's always in business. Right. So there are constantly hearings and things like that. And so because the federal laws tend to be so complex, because again, they're federal laws, right? So remember, the states are sovereign, right?
Yes.
So federal law is tricky because if you're going to apply that to all 50 states, you got to be careful, right? And that means you have to get enough people to agree to. Okay. And each of those states have representatives. My point is, you got to get enough votes in Congress to get something passed, in the House, and enough votes in the Senate to get something passed. And you're going to need a pile of votes to do that. So here's my point. When was the last time you can remember you could get 5 people to agree on the same thing?
Right. Yeah. So it's chaotic.
See the size of the challenge. Yeah. So because in DC it's so complex, there are oftentimes subcommittees. So these are committees where legislation will go through first, and then if the subcommittee passes it out and then they get it to that main committee, then they'll do it. So that's another layer that's literally due to the complexity of the issues.
Yes, and that does make sense because there is more people involved as well. Yes. So it would make sense to kind of break down the...
And in DC, these committees and subcommittees have permanent staff to help.
Yes, where the staff are experts
in the
in
legislature, there's no staff. Okay, if you were going to go to the Indiana legislature and visit a legislator in their office in the Capitol, you would be directed to a cube. They sit in cubes. That's their office. It's not like DC.
The legislators
sit in cubes. They have a cube. They have a chair. They have a desk. That's it.
I guess I've never seen the inside.
No, you haven't. That's right. It doesn't make any sense to meet them there and I've done it before, but it's a crowded room, as you can imagine. Now, they have some assistants, and there's also a page system. So when I was in high school, I was a page at the Indiana General Assembly. And so I went there and I helped with some things that needed to get done, administrative tasks that you could trust a 17-year-old with. But no.
Is that where your journey started, Chris?
Oh no, my journey started when I was 5 years old. I put birch pie for Senate door hangers on every door on the west side of Indianapolis because my parents were in the party.
That's right. You did say that you grew up in a very active...
Oh my God. Both my parents ran for office at one time. I was my mom's campaign manager when I was 18 years old. So
what? Okay, so we're definitely going to have
we got pounded. We got absolutely torn apart. I mean,
But that's how you learned. That's why you are in the place that you're in now, Chris.
I was ineffective.
Well, and now you are. It's just a coach in me. So I just have to keep flipping around. But we do have about 6 minutes left, Chris.
Yeah,
and
sure.
So what I figured,
that's basically how legislation moves.
Okay.
Right. So you can mostly what I wanted people have here was an appreciation for how tortuous that path is. And people can get very frustrated with the pace and the time and all of that. But that's because everything is strictly governed by rules. And there are rules that the House operates in Washington, D.C., rules in the Senate, and the same in Indiana. All of these are prescribed, right? And let's face it, it's a part-time legislature. Everybody there has a day job, right? So it is literally people taking time off from their jobs to come in and be legislators. And again, against the shortness of the calendar in Indiana, there's a real limit on how much can actually get done.
And I think that's so,
by design.
By design.
By
So the big
design.
takeaway
Indiana
that I
clearly
take,
did not want its legislature to. They figured if they were going to keep it out of trouble, let's limit how long they can be in business in a given year. So,
honestly, right? So they don't keep growing and keep getting themselves into more and more
yeah,
things that they
yeah.
probably just don't want to
Yeah.
deal with. But so you said governed by rule, though, and I guess what I think that's a good point to finish off on is to say that it's not always the people and it's not always personal. Sometimes it's the process and just being able to
It's
understand the whole picture.
in my experience in
Mm-hmm.
Indiana. Now, politics are sharper elbowed in DC. Okay, so
Yes, 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 yes.
DC is partisan as the day is long. Indiana is not that partisan. It's just not. I mean, it may look like that, and occasionally there are partisan takes on things. Obviously, the fact of the matter is, in Indiana, especially, the legislators usually do not disagree on what's got to get done, what a problem is. They usually both agree on that. What they disagree on is how to go at it. So it's the how. It's not the what or the why, it's the how, and that's where the differences tend to come in. But the bottom line of it is, it's yes, there's partisanship in Indiana, but it's pretty rare, and I've seen these people operate. They operate very collegially.
Mm-hmm.
They're there doing the people's work, and by and large, almost all of them take it serious. I
Yes.
have respect, quite frankly, for people who stand the test of running for office
Because it's a
and
lot.
putting themselves before the people to
That's
show up
right.
to do a job that, bluntly put, doesn't pay well at all. So,
Mm-mm. And I mean, you pretty much lose, it seems like, ownership of self because now you belong to everyone else.
well,
Your voice
and just
belongs
think
to
what it
everyone
takes to go
else.
into leadership, like you're a committee chair or something like that. I mean, that's a big job.
Yes, yes,
That's
yes.
a big job. So yeah, but anyway, that's the process by which things move through, and so we'll talk. I think in the next program, I think we need to talk. Okay, if that's the process, if those are all the
Yes.
gates, everything that has to flow through, how do votes come together? How do
Ooh,
you actually
yes.
pull that off? And
How
so,
do the votes come together? So this sounds like it's really going to start introducing us to comfortable politics,
well, yeah. I
comfortable
mean, because
activities in
well, like I
politics.
said, it mostly is. DC's, I wouldn't call DC comfortable, but Indiana by comparison is. Yeah.
Yes. And that's another reason why I wanted to do this show is that sometimes we get caught up in what's going on national. And I think we need to know what's going on nationally, but I think that we also need to have the conversations about what's going on here in our own
Well,
backyard.
and for us,
And
our advocacy is
hmm
pretty much all is largely going to be focused on the state, right? Because that's where we are, and that's what affects
yes.
us. And when it comes to DC, well, we all have our own elected representatives, right? Where we come from across the state. There's representatives for every district, right? We have 2 senators, and that advocacy is important. But once again, when I go to DC and the topics I talk about, it's all going to be through the lens of HR,
Hmm.
right? Here's what we'd like to see, and here's why. We talked to Homeland Security a lot and talked to legislators a lot during COVID about I-9s and how they would get done. And,
Oh, okay.
so we're, the advantage we have, I think, when we're talking to legislatures is our affairs are always practical ones. HR is not ideological. The matters we talk about are our bread and butter and how we do our jobs and how we serve our employers and our employees. And
Hmm.
I just don't think that's not partisan. I don't view it as partisan
No, no.
at all. Yeah.
Mm-mm. Not at all. And I think that at some point, I'd love for you to maybe even give an example of some of the things that you've had to maybe share at some point later on.
Mhm.
Not yet, just to give
Well,
people an
in the
idea.
next show, I can talk a little bit about
Yeah.
how testimony works and its
Yes,
role.
because
I'll
that'll
also
support the
talk
votes.
about the service I provide. I'm on the Indiana Chamber Labor Law Policy Committee, and I'm also on the Chamber's Health policy committee, and I'm the chair of that committee. So
Yes.
that's another influence point, right? That I can talk
Yes.
about.
And I
talk about
definitely
next time. Yeah.
And I definitely want everyone to hear that. So, so we are down to 5 o'clock, and I do apologize. We're going to tighten it up. But we're going to tighten it up and get better. But this is okay, because this is us just being able to just kind of just sit back, relax, and just share with the community. But real quick before we start closing up, just sign up with SHRM 18, because I definitely wanted to share this, because National SHRM does share wonderful resources to help you become that workplace expert. So you can you'll get the alerts and find out what's going on in DC and what SHRM is doing about it, and their voice and thoughts about it. But what else would you add to it, Chris?
No, I think that's the best way to do it. Quite frankly, the best way to stay informed. It is time consuming and painful to search. I strongly prefer having things sent to me.
Yep.
So if you sign up with the A team with SHRM, they will send stuff to you that is important about advocacy. Could you go ahead and give that, because you just text to join. You want to go ahead and give that number? Join. I emailed it to you.
You sent it to me. Okay, I apologize. Let's get that on there. Okay. Oh, did you send it to me on my phone? Oh,
on your email.
Oh, on my email. Okay. Let's get that real quick. Oh, okay. There you go. Would you like to? Okay, so let's put that out there. And then this okay. And that's okay. Let's put this in the comments. And thank you so much, Chris, for just joining me on the series. Sure. This has just been really fun. So let me see how many pages. Let's add this, because I do feel bad that I've taken that we went over a little bit, but it's only 2 minutes, so hopefully you'll have grace. But thank you so much, Chris, for just joining me on the series and just having fun with me doing this. Because I know that I'm not the only person. I'm pretty sure that there's others out there in the community that, want to learn a little bit more, want to get a little bit of understanding. And even if you feel like, you're willing to learn a little bit more, just that the holes can be filled.
Sure. I think next month we can probably do this live from DC. So I'll be in DC, so I'll just
join. That would be awesome. Oh my gosh.
See if I can get into the Capitol for it. So okay.
Yes, that would be very awesome. Yes, okay. I would love that. And thank you so much, Michelle. Michelle says that this was very informative. Cool. Thank you both. Thank you so much. So I'm going to go ahead and put the slide up here. I have the feedback form in the comments. We'd love for you to access that and share your feedback. Let us know what you thought about the show, how we can grow, because we're creating this space not only for us to learn and grow, but for you to learn and grow with us as well. Thank you so much, and until next time.
Sure, very good. Thanks.